Books and libraries can set children free. That's what poet Nikki Giovanni says. Because where else can they sail their dreams and surf rainbows without leaving the room? It is in libraries where they are reminded of how vast and multitudinous the world is, that they don't have to be disliked or misunderstood. Nikki Giovanni also wrote a poem in honor of her favorite librarian, Mrs. Long. And she says, "But there is a world somewhere out there." And Mrs. Long opened the doors to a closet, but no witches or lions scared me. I walked in knowing that it would be spring. That is what libraries, books, and librarians can do. Open doors and usher in new seasons. So with that, welcome to the Amsterdam Summit of the Europe Challenge 2024.
Yeah. Amazing to see you all here get together in this Amsterdam Summit. Welcome here in the Amsterdam Public Library, or as true Amsterdammers, and I hope from now on you will say the OBA. Yeah?
To summit, what does it mean? What does the word summit mean? It means the top, the height. So in this moment, we are reaching the height of our journey, the pinnacle of our journey. And the beautiful thing about a summit is we can enjoy the view. And we have someone joining us on our journey. He's a latecomer, but he's here nonetheless, better late than never. He is from here in Amsterdam. He's a political analyst. He's the co-founder of two organizations, Discourse and Demo, and these organizations foster political engagement through cultural events, academies, and election shows. I want to know what an election show is. So give Dylan Ahern a warm round of applause, please.
Thank you. And next to me, as you probably all know, most of you, the long-standing celebrity, the program host, of course. For those who you don't know her yet, she is a writer, curator, facilitator, and has been the program host of this year's Europe Challenge. She's also the founder of Including Society and Consultancy.
Okay,
Please
enough.
Give it up. Please give it up for Lamando Sasso.
If librarians ran Europe. You know what comes to mind when I think of that theme?
Tell me.
A different kind of power that the world so desperately needs right now. An open-mindedness, open-heartedness, a co-creative power. I think the world would be a kinder place if librarians ran Europe. They have an intrinsic ability to bring communities together. I can imagine the social cohesion if librarians ran Europe. What comes to mind for you, Dylan?
Well, honestly, you know these people much better than I do, so I can only guess. But what I think is that, let's be honest, today's Europe, for a great respect, is ran by a lot of politicians who think about short-term interests. And as Oscar Wilde would say, they know the price of everything, but of nothing the value. And I think for librarians, it could be the opposite. Maybe you know the value of a lot of things and would prioritize the right things in our societies. And that is, I think, something that we're going to talk about today. But I'm also curious, we have some other hosts in the room as well who might reflect on this big theme. And I would just like to welcome first the director of the OBA, Martin Berendsen. And also the director of the ECF, European Cultural Foundation, André Wilkens. Gentlemen, indeed, please step into the light. Maybe first to you, Mr. Berendsen. Thanks for having us in the library. And what comes to mind when you think of this theme, If Librarians Ran Europe?
The first thing I've been thinking of when I saw the theme was what is a library and how is a library run? And that's why we all are here. So welcome, guys. Very good to have you all from all those countries. Very welcome to Amsterdam. The first thing that comes to my mind is that all librarians, all people working in libraries are working on a place that is really open, really democratic, and really reaches out not to the first half of their communities, but also to the second half of their communities. That's our work. And if we would do that for Europe, then Europe would also not only reach out to the first half of Europe, but also to the second half of Europe. And that would be great news.
That would be good. Thank you so much. Mr. Wilkins, what does the theme mean for you? How did you come up with this big theme?
I think my team came up with this, and then they asked me, "What do you think about this?" And I had to think. Then I had to think
Credits
about
to the
this.
team. Fair enough.
Initially, it sounded a bit scary. Librarians running Europe. I thought, "Who?" So I actually really sat down, and it took longer than I initially thought. I thought, I've been involved with the Europe Challenge for a while, so just to do this quickly. No, it took some time. But no, what sticks out for me is one number I've been always looking at is 65,000 libraries, public libraries in Europe, with millions of people who go there all the time, estimated around 100 million. And I'm thinking, this is huge. This is a huge power, and it's very local. It's not sort of Brussels and something around. It's everywhere. And my dream. And this is related to librarians, library communities running Europe, is if you connect these 65,000, if you connect the people who come daily to the libraries in a European social network. I think this term European or social network was hijacked by technology. I think we have to claim it back for us. Connect the 65,000 libraries and their communities and the librarians, of course. And then we create a European social network. And that's the innovative part of it. And, I'm been involved with the Europe Challenge for some time, and I see that already developing. So that is what I see. I don't see only the librarians running Europe. I see the communities in the libraries running Europe together with us. That's my dream.
Oh, I want to take the mic for one.
I think we can go, Dylan.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because, guys, I don't know whether this is in the program, and we were applauding for everybody and ourselves and for the OA. But this vision is a very strong vision, and I think we all, as a library community, should be very grateful of the step-by-step involvement of the European Culture Foundation in the European library community. Give him and give his team a big hand, please.
Martin Berendsen and André Wilkins, thank you so much.
Thank you. One of the strongest indicators of a strong democracy is a flourishing public library. We hear so often that democracy is under pressure, it's under threat. What does that mean? And all of this is invoking a number of questions such as, who is the library for? What is it for? And can it serve as a meeting place, for different minds? Can the public library serve as a barrier against authoritarianism? And can it restore public trust in public institutions? All of these questions we're going to explore through 3 different lenses, 3 different experiences. First is through Fedele Canosa, who is an architect. I love architects, I love buildings, I love architecture. He's an Italian-born architect who lives here in Amsterdam. he works at the Delft-based architecture firm called Mecanoo. And he is very good at, his specialty is creating and designing libraries, you know, communal spaces, learning spaces, and you've been involved in the making of the Birmingham Library. Google the images. Well, I don't know about the Birmingham Library. It is quite mind-blowing. The Locale Library, also some libraries in the US, the Martin Luther King Library and the New York Library. So again, please give him a warm welcome. And he's Italian, and he told me he's a great cook. So, yeah. Next we have Sara Bindeballe. And she is a library worker from Dock 1 Aarhus Main Library. And you strengthen your local democracy through workshops and debates and creating new partnerships. She came up with this really cool idea of a social librarian, someone to help deal with the socio-political issues in the community, such as drug abuse, homelessness, and mental health. And you're also part of the Europe Challenge. A couple of years ago. So please, let's welcome Sara. Khalid, our last panelist for this first discussion. You're a Sudanese political cartoonist. Look up his work. It's been featured in the New York Times, The Guardian, many more publications. You live in Oslo currently. You were born in Romania, grew up in Sudan, but because of the military coup, they had to leave the Sudan to go to Qatar, where you grew up. And at some point in his life as an artist, he found himself in a residency in Denmark. And you said that the public libraries in Denmark served as a refuge for you. And that's where you had the idea for the Sudan Art and Design Library, and which would be based in Sudan. So yeah, incredible idea. So welcome, Khalid. Before we start our conversation, there's an interesting story in Genoa, Italy, of a library that is really an animation of what this theme is about. So I want us to, together, take a look at what's happening in Italy.
Qui siamo a Lagaccio, un quartiere popolare di Genova, ed è qui che stiamo per incontrare Agnese Martino, una maestra che ci farà vedere la casa nel parco, un'ex caserma trasformata in una biblioteca pubblica gestita interamente da volontari.
Lagaccio, la strada del Lagaccio non passa attraverso la città, è un quartiere che rimane un po' isolato dal centro. Nel passato è stato un quartiere di immigrazione nazionale dal sud Italia e adesso ci sono anche molte etnie diverse del mondo che hanno trovato qua casa. Eccoci qua.
Bello!
Quanti giorni sei in mano? 4 giorni.
Esce 4 giorni.
Questo è un luogo accessibile a tutti perché è un luogo aperto, che quando ci sono i volontari che aprono, chiunque può entrare. Scegliamoci un po' un libro, scegliete un po' un libro che volete leggere. In una biblioteca trovi storie nelle quali puoi ritrovare anche te stesso, di sentire un bimbo profugo che aveva attraversato il mare sul barcone, che quando ha visto l'immagine del pesciolino nel mare da sola ha detto ma quello sono io.
Cosa faranno i 4 amici? Forse l'animano. Troveranno avere il buco, è vero.
Alla casa nel parco oggi si gioca. Ma c'è anche una lezione di italiano aperta e gratuita per tutti.
Se tu dici io sono un pacco di biscotti, vuol dire che tu non sei un ragazzo, sei un pacco di biscotti.
Sì.
Ma mi sa di no, perché sei un bel ragazzo.
Capito.
Quindi non sei un pacco di biscotti, ok? L'articolo mi dice che questo è un plurale femminile, ok?
ai ragazzi o alle donne che vengono qua imparare un italiano basico gli permette intanto di non sentirsi così lontani da casa, ma di avere quello strumento che è fondamentale, che è la lingua, per comunicare con gli italiani, anche per prendersi un caffè o per fare un documento. La seconda parte, la seconda cosa che imparano o che arriva è l'accoglienza. Peter, guarda il numero 7.
Correggi gli argomenti,
gli aggettivi.
Gli aggettivi in queste frasi mi aiutano gratuitamente a parlare l'italiano, que para mí es muy importante, muy necesario para mi vida. Me tuve que venir a mi país, de mi país con la mia mamá, pero no tengo documentos. Espero poder trabajar como perruquiere aquí en la Italia, poner mi propio negocio como lo tenía en Ecuador. Ahora mismo estoy utilizando palabras italianas que yo nunca pensé que iba a hacerlo. Siento que voy a aprender rápido.
Credo che le biblioteche siano un po' il motore della società. C'è conoscenza, ma c'è anche leggerezza, c'è anche divertimento e quindi c'è un po' tutto, c'è la bellezza della cultura fruibile a tutti.
Let's give them a round of applause. You know, as we're watching that video, that visual, you know, the theme of our conversation is libraries as democratic spaces for all. And when I see that example in Italy, I see that a library can be a place of choice and agency, of beauty, of imagination, of belonging, of fun, of education and discovery. And I think all those are ingredients that any strong democracy needs. So again, please give that library a thank you so much. So we're gonna get right into it, and I wanna start with this idea of democracy. And I love questions. I love beautiful questions. And I want to know from each of you, just to set the tone for the conversation. You know, I often think of democracy as asking the question of what can we be to each other? You know, how can we be of use to each other? How we can be of service to each other? And I just wanted to get a sense of what is the question you think is at the heart of your idea of democracy, and you know, what you're trying to animate through your work, whether it's architecture, you know, the programming of a library, or as an artist's take on what a library can be. So we'll start, yeah.
So, can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you very much to invite me. Yeah. I'm very happy to be here and share my knowledge with you. By the way, I like a lot the videos that we saw, and I come from Italy. I know this situation. I know that also churches are involved in this kind of, helping people, communities, people coming from different countries which they don't speak the language. So the library, the church, all this public institution, they work for this kind of communities. Back to your question, I think the freedom, the expression of ideas and in the community, it's very important. The question is, how do you express this, and how you make sure that it's expressed in a positive way? So from my side, I think that it's more understanding the balance between the individual idea, expression, freedom, and the collective ideas. Make sure that you are responsible for what you are saying and what you are doing. From a design point of view, I think we have the responsibility to create, to facilitate this, because you can design space, you can design rooms where people start to feel home and also free and comfortable to express what they think. So this is for me important as a designer, because we see every day. So when you start to design a building, and also when it's built, you see how people react to the spaces.
I love that coming from an architect, that the question there is, how do you feel at home? I think that's beautiful. Thank you. Sara? Sara, by the way, loves political satire, so you're sitting next to the right person. And what's the question for you, Sara?
Yeah, so I think in Aarhus Public Libraries, where I come from, we work very much from the point of view that democracy is an ongoing conversation. It's like a conversational view of democracy. So we don't see democracy as a system that's in place, and it's a way of, well, it is obviously a formal way of handling decision-making in society, but we see it very much as an ongoing conversation and a way of life, a conversation that has to be kept alive across society, across different groups, age groups, ethnicities, genders, all these things. And because that conversation is so important, and that's what we're working with, I would say the question would be something like, have we heard from everyone? Or maybe who haven't we heard from? Yeah.
I love that. And for some reason, when you ask that question, there's a documentary that I love saying, it's called Have You Heard from Joburg? So when you said, have you heard from everyone? I feel like it's a challenge for you to produce a documentary by that name. Or a book. Thanks, Sara. Khalid, what is the question for you?
First of all, thank you for having me. I love being around librarians and libraries. It's like a warm hug, you know. Everyone really cares, you know. And this is something that I found out in when I got the access. And this is I think my question is, do we have the access? When I found the access to freedom of information and freedom of gathering, is just, you know, people gathering and having being surrounded by information and being surrounded by people that give you that information and help you look for it. And you know, I remember just being in the Copenhagen Central Library, and I asked about a book, and they didn't have it, and the librarian was very upset, you know, that they don't have it. She's like, "We'll order it for you, you know, we'll get it for you, don't worry." And it was, for me, that's incredible, because, you know, we didn't have this kind of access back home, right? And this is, I think it's very important. It's just the access to free and open knowledge and helping you get to that.
And just to stick with this idea of back home for you being Sudan, you know, with the conflict happening there, some people may say that the last thing that the Sudan needs is a library, and your idea, your project, your vision is the building and the making of the Art and Design Library. It sounds a little bit up there, you know, it sounds like a frivolity right now. How do you make a case for that? What role can a library play in a place like Sudan?
I mean, you know, when I speak to people and they tell me that the library is the last thing we need, is either that they didn't have the access to libraries and they think that's normal, that's how it is, just how we lived quite fine. They didn't without libraries, or it's people that are really just think less of us and think that it's okay. You never had a library, so you know you don't need libraries right now. You know, we need you to be in a better standard for you to have such easy and normal things for us. Right, so it's you're either racist or you're either just haven't seen it before, you know. And this is sadly the world that we live in, and in Sudan, especially in Sudan, you know, I remember my mom telling me that they didn't have neighborhood libraries, but they set up libraries, and it was basically neighborhood libraries where if you finish a book or you finish a magazine, even old magazines, right? People will have them on the street, and people will just come and, you know, put a book for a book or whatever. And this was just something that we had. But that slowly died because people are, you know, it's on the everyday grind. People need to, you know, do things, and people need to find a living, and people had very little access. And of course, the internet kind of bypassed all of that with providing people with uncensored, it was censored, but at the beginning it wasn't censored information and so on. So it's about that. And for us also it was the political situation where the governments they know the power of people gathering, right? And libraries are that place, Libraries, people gather, people have access to information, and that proved that it's dangerous to them.
Yeah, it makes the library a battleground. And just to come back to you, Sara, when I think of the challenges facing Europe. I'm a visitor here in Europe, but they are universal issues and very local issues. Khalid said that he loves being around librarians. It feels like a warm hug. Do you think Europe needs a warm hug? Like, what is the kind of librarian Europe needs right now when you consider the local and universal issues that are posing a threat to democracy? Or a library worker, as you like.
So I think everyone needs a warm hug all the time. It's not just Europe. But I do see democracy being threatened in a number of ways across Europe also, and in a way that I never thought it would be. Growing up, I was born in '81, so for me it was all going uphill democracy-wise until it didn't. And for me, I've been thinking about this question of democracy because it's very interesting for me now to work with democracy in a library context. It's my passion. It's a lot of fun. And I got to thinking about how the whole concept of democracy 10 years ago, 15 years ago, just would have bored me, and I would have just not been interested. Because I used to think of democracy very much the same way I think of having clean water in the tap. It's there, that's very nice. It's not something I want to spend a lot of time talking about or investigating or making sure we keep having. It's just there. And the last 10 years, maybe it's increasingly feeling like it might not always be there. So I think democracy is threatened in a number of ways, also in Europe, and a lot of the global tendencies we see threatening it are reflecting in the Nordic countries now as well. And I see libraries as an obvious starting point to strengthen them and investing in them and funding them and sharing experiences as we do here to counter those threats. And the threats would be polarization, first of all, I think, as a sort of baseline problem for solving all the other problems. That public discourse is very much moving online, where it's becoming, completely hopeless. And we really, really need face-to-face meetings in neutral public spaces, which the library can be. I loved what Mr. Wilkins said about social media has, what was the phrase? Sort of hijacked, exactly, yeah, the phrase, the social network. So yeah, we're the original social network, or we could be, yeah.
And what qualities do you think librarians or library workers tend to have that kind of lend themselves to them being at perhaps the forefront of addressing some of these issues?
So for me, it's this ambition of not just curating a collection, because we do offer free and equal access to knowledge, or that's the ideal, and that's incredibly important. But it's not just having the collection sit there. It's making sure that it's being used, and that's what I see in so many libraries all over Europe, including all of these probably, that librarians work in a lot of inventive new ways to make the conversation happen, not just have the material standing on the shelf, but initiating conversations across society and being a platform, like a venue for dialogue. Not always in a variety of shapes and formats, so not just traditional political meetings or debate meetings, but could be, that language class taking place, or cultural events and activities where societies talk about what we think is important in society and talk about our values is also taking place. Yeah.
And I see you as someone who builds space through the programming and curation and all of that. And Fedele, you build literal bricks and mortar spaces. And, coming from South Africa, I see the remnants of apartheid South Africa's architecture. Just slabs of concrete, hardly any windows, high pillars, very intimidating buildings. And I think when we think of democracy, we want something on the other extremes. And I'm interested in finding out from you is like, how do you bring the principles of democracy to life? That expression you were talking about earlier. And I know you've got some images to talk us through, but this is why architects are my favorite people, because I think there's intentionality in everything that you do.
First, I want to tell a personal story. I was studying in Venice. We are talking about 1992, 3. And in the library in Venice, I don't know if you've been there, they're very silent. You cannot talk. You take the book, you sit there. And that time it was really, the classic library. Then I moved to the Netherlands and I went to study to the TU Delft University. And at the TU Delft University, I discovered a library with a roof that you could walk on the roof. I don't know if you know this building. It's designed by the company where I work. And for me, it was completely a big change because I was able to take the book from the building, go outside, sitting on the roof of this building and start to meet people. So this is again, how do you stimulate and create spaces where people start to engage each other and you start to create a community. So this was for me one of the stories that I try always to tell my clients. Another thing is that diversity. I learned with this building, local. I will invite you to visit the building. With all respect to Oba, I like Oba, so it's. I also designed 2 libraries for the Oba. But this building is very special because you enter in a kind of open, you can say, market hall. And with the different spaces, different situation. And what is important is that what we saw is that the people with different culture, different ages, different needs, they start to look their own space. It's like when you have to cook something, you have in mind some ingredients, you go to the market hall and you start to buy the ingredients, but then sometimes when you walk along the different small shops, you see things that say, hi, this might be also good, so maybe I can buy this one. And again, it's a question to how you put together the different cultural groups, ages that start to feel home. They feel comfortable to use the space, move things. And what I learned in all this design of the library is that there is no unique space or rules. All are different. And this is because the people are different. So the starting point is always who are the people, understanding where they come from, how they use the space, how they use their own city, and what is their need. And from these questions, from the knowledge and that we get from the different people, with engagement of the people, then you start to develop a situation where they are welcoming.
Thank you so much. I just want to pause here. I'm very bad with timekeeping. Do I have time for another round of questions? Thanks, Dylan. Khalid, I'm just hearing, that idea of design. When you think of the library that you're designing for the Sudan, and just maybe give people an update on where this project is. Is it happening? Have you broken ground yet? And when you think of it visually, when you think of context and you think of place and people, from your artistic vision, what would it look like? Would it look like the library where you found refuge in Denmark, or is there something particular to Sudan that you think this library design needs to speak to? And I hope you can connect after this.
Absolutely, yeah. So the idea came to me in Copenhagen, because I was like, we really need this. We do have the libraries in Sudan, but it's like you're going into, I don't know, like you're going into a high-level secret meeting or something. You have to meet like a police and then another guy and then another security, and it's very uptight. It's in universities and so on. So I wanted something that is as open as this, and how can we do that? And because coming from I'm a political cartoonist, and I realized that at a certain point, of course, with the democracies and just watching my friends, go to jails and not being defended by the countries that claim democracy, and we all seen the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi getting killed and assassinated in Turkey, and we all know who killed him, and everything is okay, right? Like nothing actually happened. So that made me realize that I'm never gonna win. We're fighting a machine, and doing it, one by one is not going to work. So we need a lot of us to do this together, right? And what is the first thing that gets people together? Is a library, is again, access to knowledge and access to the space. So what I know is arts and design, and how I want people to be more artists. I want for them to have this access. And also, when I was in Sudan, I was doing this book called Sudan Retold, which was about, basically it's an art book about history, about knowing our history. And I wanted to give the participants examples of books, and we couldn't find any. We couldn't find any graphic novels. We couldn't find any design books. We couldn't find any art books, and I had to bring my own books to the workshop to show people, because there weren't any, right? So this kind of started the idea, and then with the help of the Goethe Institute in Sudan, I brought in my graphic novels, my books, and then we started basically the first graphic novels or art library in Africa. Right? It was a small thing, but it was also in a very prestigious, kind of hard to get into space, which is the Goethe Institute. So from there, I was like, why don't we just bring this out to the people? It would be better if it's in a bigger building. So, when I tell my friends this in Europe, they're like, yeah, why don't you just do a library? It's just build a library. What's so hard about that? And then in Sudan, I literally, when I was in Copenhagen, I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to apologize to the dictator. I'm going to be like, listen, man, I'm sorry. Bygones be bygones. I'm not going to do any cartoons, Just let me build my library, right? And luckily enough, that's when a revolution happened in Sudan in 2019. So I went in, and the revolution itself was led by three things that the dictator was trying to fight for 30 years, right? Which is women, unions, and artists. Right? And all of that came back and bit him in the ass, So it was an amazing revolution. I went out, I was like, all right, I went to the government at the time, I want to build a library. And they're like, yeah, great, we're going to bring out all these buildings, we're going to give you a building. I was like, all right, amazing. And then COVID happened, everything shut down, right? After COVID, I went back again, I was like, listen, I want to do my library. There's no way we can't do this. So we thought about, okay, what's the best way to do this? And especially because of the small alleyways, I don't know if anyone has been to Sudan, probably not, but it kind of looks like, a small old Medina, it looks like Marrakesh or something like that, especially where I'm from, in Omdurman, the old city. So we did a design competition, and the winner concept was a rickshaw, right? That holds a library, but also we can do screenings and we can do all of these things. So we wanted to produce the design, we were going for funding, and I go for funders and I'm like, I want to build a library, this is a design. And they're like, bookshop. I'm like, no, library. They're like, bookshop. I'm like, I'm not selling anything, it's a library. They're like, how are you going to make our money back? I'm like, I'm not going to make your money back. It's a library, And I'm trying to do a government's job, because it was, of course, we didn't have the infrastructure for it, and we didn't, and as I said before, people don't know what they need because they don't see it.
They've never seen it.
So it was really interesting actually talking to people that have seen it but didn't want to fund it.
To be honest, this is why I think you're posed to be at the helm of this project, because artists tend to see things that others haven't. But just to wrap up this round, Sara, when you think of libraries in the future, how do we maintain the relevance of libraries in our communities? What has maintained your relevance as a library in your community? If you could share some tips.
Yeah, I guess what you guys are already doing, because what I totally forgot to mention until now is that working with partnerships, because what I said before maybe sounded like, we have this terribly important role. We curate and we make the conversation happen. And of course, we only do that insofar as we work with local voices and associations and clubs and so on in our community. So like Khalid coming as an engaged citizen and having something he wants to attain. I'm not saying we build a library with every person who comes and has an idea.
Why not?
Why not? We're not opposed. So a lot of our events and activities, by far the most of them at Dog One is driven by partnerships.
What would you say is your sort of marquee kind of program, like right now? Like one that you're really proud of? Or maybe let's talk about the social librarian and what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm proud of that. Yeah, it wasn't my idea, by the way. It was Esmond, who's a part of the group now. Yeah, it was his idea. Yeah, but we have this woman that we hired for a couple hours a week. She can't hold a regular job because we met her through our partnership with a local drop-in center for people who have led very tough lives, so she can't work a regular job. She's been a drug addict for many years. She's been homeless. She has psychiatric challenges, but she works with us in a position where she helps us make events and activities for people who lead very different lives from the rest of us. And that's just, I could talk about that for a long time, but it's part of this ongoing thinking about who gets hurt. If we say that the reason we should be a venue for public meetings and conversations and this democratic discourse going on all the time, then it's also really important that everybody takes part in that discussion. So why do we need it? We need it for the people who come there, but democracy needs it. I mean, in order for democracy to survive and thrive, we need as many diverse voices as possible. Yeah. And we used to be a library where a lot of people, for instance, with homelessness or drug use, came to hang out and seek shelter and read the newspaper and use the internet, but we never used to see them much at events and activities. We didn't hear from them. We didn't see what they could contribute with. And that's what we're trying with this social librarian, to small steps, but we're trying to make inroads there and let people present what they can bring to the table and be the ones starting the discussion. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
we were in Copenhagen, going into the library in the morning. It was always me and the homeless dudes. It was like we were the one opening the. They go straight to the newspapers. And just
good company.
It's such a beautiful site, really. That it just provides the shelter.
I have to say, what I enjoy about this one that we're in. When I arrived, there wasn't a barrage of questions of what are you doing, where are you going. It was just simply come in. So I appreciate that. Fedele, lastly, when it comes to, you said something beautiful of you can't build a library without asking who are the people. So not only must the building animate democratic principles, but I take it that the process of designing has to be democratic. Can you just give us a glimpse of, before you even start to put pen to paper, how do you think of finding out who the people are? What does that process look like?
Before I want to jump a little bit in the previous question, I think from a design point of view, I will say be prepared for the changes. So make sure that your building, your space can change during the years. Make sure that it's a flexibility, because if you compare the library 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it's a lot different, a lot of different things happening. So the activities, the engagement of people. So this is just a suggestion. Back to your question, yes, the understanding the people, as I said before, so it starts first where they come from. When we start the library of Birmingham is the second city in which have a lot of immigrants, a lot of people from different countries after London. And for us was important because to understand how these people live there. And the library in Birmingham is the biggest public library in Europe. So it was a symbol for all this country. And so from that kind of a question, observing, asking, understanding also what was their need, this started the design of the building. So the engagement of people, the workshops, the participation with the different groups are very important in order to, as an architect, understand what should be the space. Another thing I will say also is very important is I always put the question to the client, what am I allowed to do in the library? Because that gives me the sense of understanding how free I'm in the building. I'm talking for myself, but it's for everybody. So, and then I start with a stupid question and say, can I take my coffee somewhere between the books, drink the coffee there? And then, another stupid question is, can I eat my pizza between the books? And maybe put my shoes on the one of the bench. So, I'm just give an example to understand how free to use the space and in which way people can sit there, move their own chairs and table on the right position. This is very important for the design of the future.
How free are we? I'm sure we shouldn't be taking any pizza into certain parts of the library.
Pomegranate. We had a
it's
user.
Not a hard no.
We had a user recently who ate a pomegranate like all over the keyboard of one of the public computers. That's not recommended.
Oh no. Do you have time for audience questions, or are we done?
We can do one.
Who's got a pressing? I'm going to see who this brave person is going to be, who's got a very pointed question. Oh, I'm impressed. They're at the back.
Got a mic?
Let's see how far you can throw, Dylan.
Yeah.
But don't hit anyone.
How good can you catch?
Don't. Nice.
That was super risky. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for the microphone, Dylan. My name is Joseph. I'm from Backlash Media. Thanks for your insights and sharing about the libraries of the future, the role of the library. I'm from Ireland originally, and right now, with libraries over there, people stand in front of them to protect them when they have library reading hour, where a drag queen is reading a story for children, and library staff feel they have to protect the children and the book reader, and a very small number of narrow-minded people target those libraries to cause a commotion. I think we know the story. I think we know what's happening there. So when we talk about the libraries of the future and democratic design, do we now also have to think about security? And if it's an open space where we're welcoming people in and homeless people use it as a shelter and it's maintaining mental health security for lots of people in the community, what can we do for this new challenge, which I worry may grow in the future rather than disappear with time?
I think all three of you can answer that question in your own way, and I would thank you so much. It's the idea of freedom and constraint. You do want a free space, but at the same time, there are realities, and how do you build that in? And you don't have to think of it literally in a security sense. I think you can think of freedom and constraint in the way that you'd like to interpret it. But Fedele, maybe you can answer that question in terms of practically. Do you think of security in your design, or is that the function of another service provider?
So I'll give you an example, which I know is different, but just is the way how you can sometimes solve things. When I start to design the Martin Luther King Library in Washington, D.C., for the first time I experienced a large group of homeless people. So at 8 o'clock in the morning, there's a bus arriving, they drop there, the large groups, and the homeless people, they spend time in the library. And a lot of people, when we start the renovation of the building, they say, we feel insecure in the building, especially if you bring your children and young mothers, so family. They were not using anymore this building because of this situation, because everywhere were homeless people sitting there. And of course, you cannot say to these people, you are not allowed to come in this building. It's a public building, it's an open building. So then you start to think, how can design the space in a way that, these people can sit there, but at the same time, you get the feeling that I'm safe. So what we did is we start to make the bookshelving lower in order to see who is in the space. Because when the bookshelving are tall, you don't know who is behind the shelving. So it gives the sense of, okay, I can stay there, I see who is around, and, we start to control the space. Another thing was about the staircase. The staircase were enclosed staircase, and a lot of people say, it's scary. I don't want to go up because you never know what happened in this staircase. We opened the staircase. A lot of discussion because it was a monument. It was a building designed by Mies van der Rohe, a Dutch German architect. But we convinced the different communities and groups to say, hey, if you open the walls and the stairs become transparent, visible, then you encourage people to use the space. It becomes more social control. And if somebody's there, you will feel safe. So it's just, start to understand where is the problem and how you can, as a designer, I'm talking as a designer, help improving the security aspect of the building.
Creative solutions. And I think just Sara and Khalid, just to end off this discussion, what comes to mind for you as just your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And we had the drag queen story hour controversy last year in Copenhagen. It's a recurring thing, and we have had. There are so many issues. That's what I meant by polarization as a really big threat to democracy. That it's like the ability to talk to one another across differences of opinion is really being tested in these years, and we have had a few events where we had to have actually police protection because the debates were so controversial, but it was very, very few. And I would say, and I would hope, that the answer is just certainly not to back down, but to enhance. I mean, to have more conversations, more well thought out dialogues where people meet across differences of opinion, training their ability to disagree in a democratic way, and hopefully speeding up the number and quality of conversations can replace the need for security in the end. That's my hope.
Thank you.
In Sudan, we have this saying that's known in the region. It's Egypt writes, Beirut prints, Sudan reads. And that's one thing I think that all Sudanese agree on. We don't agree on a lot of things together, but this is one thing that we agree on is the importance of reading. So there were actually, during Omar al-Bashir's dictatorship, there was actually secret book markets that happened. It's not even markets, it's just to trade books that happened, and then they will be raided by the government. And the second thing is when I was working on starting the mobile library, the rickshaw library, which didn't happen because of the war, by the way, it's one of the questions was like, what if someone takes books? And, you know, me and my staff were like, yeah, let them take the books. What's the problem? That's part of it, you know, but like, we're not going to have any books. I'm like, we'll bring more books. Let them take the books. It's fine, you know? So this is one idea that I didn't mind at all. And then at the last stage also of the programming is that because it's a mobile library, we were working with something in Sudan, which was very effective during the revolution. And even now they have soup kitchens and everything during the war. It's called the neighborhood resistance committees, right? So these are people from the neighborhood that work in doing the job of the government, basically. So we put our programming with them to work around what does this area need? Do we have more children? Do we have more money? More women? What does the area need? So we worked with, because it's an open space, we use the neighborhood as our building. Right, so we come with our rickshaw, or that was the plan until the war happened, basically. But we were supposed to come with the rickshaw. We stay there for 3-4 days in the protection of the people of the neighborhood, and we do programs that are for the people of the neighborhood. So it's for us, by us, basically. So I don't think there was a need for security.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's beautiful to end on that note that the library can be a democratic space for all because the neighborhood is your building. And I just want to thank you all for sharing your experiences, your insights, and your beautiful questions. So please, let's give our panelists. Thank you.